This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Somalia cuts diplomatic ties with Kenya and alleges political interference. Boko Haram claims responsibility for recent abduction of Nigerian schoolboys. And Sudan is now officially out of the U.S. list of state sponsors of terrorism. So, what's next for the country? Hello, welcome to Africa Live. As always, great to have you with us. I'm Richard Nta, live in Nairobi. And for those of you joining us from across the continent and around the globe, we thank you for joining us. Let's take a look at other stories making headlines this hour. Nigeria's trade deficit balloons in the third quarter of 2020. And in sports, Tunisian weightlifting star Kerem Ben-Henia sets sights on the 2021 Olympic Games in Japan. Once again, welcome to Africa Live. So good to have you with us. I'm Richard Nta. Let's begin with the escalation of a diplomatic spat between Somalia and Kenya. Somalia has announced it has cut ties with the neighboring country. Somalia's Minister of Information, Usman Abubakar Dube, accuses Kenya of interfering with and violating Somalia's sovereignty and territorial integrity. The developments come hours after President Uhuru Kenyatta held talks with Somaliland President Musa Bihi in Kenya. Mogadishu now says it will withdraw all its diplomats from Kenya and has ordered Kenyan diplomats to leave the country within 7 days. On November the 29th, Somalia summoned its envoy to Kenya for consultations, accusing Nairobi of interfering with Mogadishu's electoral process. All right, now let's discuss this further. We are joined by CGTN's Abdulaziz Billo in Mogadishu and, of course, Adel Al-Mahroui in Cairo. But first, let's get more from CGTN's Adel Al-Mahroui, who is in Cairo. Adel, the first question goes to you. Adel, the Arab League has issued a statement supporting Somalia. Can you give us more details on this?
The Arab League in general, throughout these diplomatic tension that has been going on and off between Somalia and Kenya, has been promoting actually developing and deepening ties between Somalia, a member state of the Arab League, and Kenya. Just last year, the latest statement from the Arab League back then when the normalization of ties began, the Arab League supported that and was a vocal supporter of mending ties and pushing for peaceful political dialogues. However, in this diplomatic rift, the Arab League has not yet released an official statement. I've tried to approach the League's office, the Deputy Secretary General, for comment. They were not available, neither was the Egyptian Foreign Ministry, and it seems that still the official stance has not been cleared out yet by the League specifically. But in general, when it comes to such a conflict between an Arab member state and an African nation, the Arab League usually tends to be supportive to the positive process of having good ties between the Arab world and its neighbors in Africa. And it is expected to see a continuation of these diplomatic efforts from the League and from Arab countries in North Africa like Egypt, from Egypt to Mauritania, to support such moves as well.
All right, Adel, let's leave it there for now. Thank you for your insights. Let's now get the latest from Mogadishu. Abdulaziz Billo, thank you for joining us here on Africa Live. Can you give us an update on what is happening, given that the decision was reportedly reached in the wee hours of the night?
Well, Richard, the decision, as you've mentioned, was reached in the wee hours of the night, past midnight Somalia time. The statement was also televised live on the state broadcaster, that is the Somali National TV, by the Information, Culture and Tourism Minister, Usman Abubakar Dube. Now, if I may shed more light on what the minister said, he said that the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the federal government of Somalia have jointly cut diplomatic ties with Kenya, citing a number of violations that Nairobi has committed in recent months. As now, according to the minister in his speech, all diplomatic corps from Kenya stationed in Mogadishu must leave the capital, Mogadishu, in the next 7 days, starting from 15th October. And it has also recalled all diplomatic corps within the Somali mission was stationed in Nairobi to return back to Somalia for talks. Now, this is an escalation of tension between the two East African neighbors that has in recent days increased. We know just earlier this month, Mogadishu recalled its envoy to Kenya and expelled the Kenyan diplomat from Somalia, citing Nairobi's pressure against Jubaland authorities to pull out of the election deal. This is one of the reasons that the Ministry of Foreign Affairs has cited that Kenya continues to meddle in the internal politics of the Horn of African nation by pressuring regional authorities to pull out of election deals. Now, the election itself has suffered a setback. MPs are supposed to be elected starting from the 1st of December towards the 10th, and the senators towards the end of the month. That has not happened, and that has caused the delay. So Somalia is of the view that Kenya is pressuring regional authorities not to come to the table and the elections to take place on time. So the escalation has seen an increase in recent days, with the Mogadishu now saying that it has severed all diplomatic ties, and it is also now seeking the help of a regional body, IGAD, so that this issue can be addressed.
All right, Abdulaziz, with all that you've said, let's not forget Mogadishu also wrote a protest letter against Kenya to the Intergovernmental Authority on Development. Can you tell us more about that?
Well, Richard, in the past 2 months, that is November and December, the series of escalation has increased between Nairobi and Mogadishu. First, there was an election deal that was signed by Somali federal government and regional administration that the election should take place on time, that members of parliament should be elected in December, and the presidential vote should take place as scheduled on the 8th of February. That is not expected to happen right now because there's a much delay. So Somalia is of the view that Kenya has been influencing the electoral process in Somalia. For one, the regional president of Jubaland, Ahmed Mohamed Islam, went to Nairobi and he was there for a couple of days. And after he returned back, after signing the deal, he pulled out of that deal, saying that until the federal government of Somalia pulls out the forces from the Gedo region alongside the border with Kenya, elections will not happen. So Mogadishu is of the view that the forces in Gedo are the federal forces and they will remain there, and that elections will take place there. And then there's also the issue of Somaliland. That is the regional breakaway state that is in northern Somalia. Yesterday there was a meeting in the Kenya's capital, Nairobi, between the president of the breakaway region, Musa Bihi Abdi, and Kenyan President Uhuru Kenyatta. This has angered Mogadishu to an extent that it has sought the help of the Intergovernmental Authority on Development so that this issue can be addressed. Mogadishu is of the view that Kenya is trying to use Somaliland as a pawn to launch the diplomatic ties here in Somalia. It's of the view that no country should be able to interfere in the internal politics and the national sovereignty of Somalia. Somalia considers Somaliland, the breakaway region of northern Somalia, as part and parcel of the Somali administration, and it wants the world to believe the same. On the other hand, Somaliland is of the view that it's an independent nation and is seeking statehood for the past 3 decades. So there's that up and forth between Somalia and Somaliland in recent years. There are also talks, and that's why Mogadishu now is of the view that IGAD is the only body that can solve this matter, because the 20th of December, the summit is supposed to take place in Djibouti, and if the tensions continue to rise, the fate of Kenyan troops stationed in Somalia or part of the African Union Force, AMISOM, assisting the Somali government will hang in the balance, because if there's so much tension between the two countries, it's highly unlikely that they can cooperate on security matters if they're not able to agree diplomatically. Richard.
Abdulaziz Billah reporting from Mogadishu. We appreciate your update. Let's turn our attention now to Nigeria, where militant group Boko Haram has claimed responsibility for the abduction of 300 students in the country. Gunmen on motorcycles seized the students after storming an all-boys boarding school in the state of Katsina last Friday. Earlier, the Nigerian government said it was negotiating with suspects, but refused to reveal any more details. In 2014, the Islamist group carried out a similar kidnapping. Boko Haram says it is against Western-style education. All right, let's get more on this. We now have on the phone Sadiq Bindawa, a reporter at Katsina Post. Sir, thank you for joining us here on Africa Live. Can you give us an update on the exact numbers of children who were kidnapped, given that there have been conflicting reports on the same? The government says 10 children were kidnapped. Other sources say over 200. Do we have any clarity on this?
Yes. There are conflicting reports about the number of kidnapped school children. Malam Garba Shehu, who is a senior special assistant to President Buhari, in an interview with newsmen has disagreed with the figures. Malam Garba Shehu said only 10 school children were missing during the attack. Meanwhile, according to the report from the governor of Katsina State and the state education authorities, who are much closer to the school, said the school has a population of 839 students, and they are yet to account for 333 students. This means the governor told the federal government delegation during their visit to the place of the attack. That means, according to the state government, only 333 students were missing during the attack, and they were yet to be found. And also there were reports, according to one of the boys, who luckily enough happened to escape in the morning, told reporters that in that night, while they were trekking, they were asked to be counted, and there were 520 of them who were with their abductors. According to him, he told reporters. So clearly there are conflicting figures, but whatever the numbers are, there are a large number of students, above 200, still in captivity at the hands of the government that need to be urgently saved and bring them back to their own families.
All right, that's Sadiq Bindawa, a reporter at Katsina Post. Thank you for bringing all of that there to light. We appreciate your time. Well, the news continues on Africa Live. Don't go away. We've got a lot more coming your way. Here's a look at what's ahead. Sudan is now officially out of U.S. list of state sponsors of terrorism. But what's next for the country? And keep it here for our first episode of Panorama Africa, where CGTN Lindy Mtongana unpacks the grim realities of climate change.
Africa is a continent of diversity, with varied climate and enchanting geography, and a people so distinct, but with a shared enduring spirit. We are at the heart of the continent to bring you the untold stories.
Let's have a look.
We celebrate Africa as it shapes its own destiny.
Athens, Tunis, Cairo,
Juba,
Johannesburg, Ethiopia, Tanzania.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Welcome back to Africa Live. Thanks for staying with us. The United States has formally removed Sudan from a list of nations that sponsor terrorism. This ends a 27-year period of sanctions that left the North African country out of the international community. It crippled its economy and blocked access to financial aid. Sudanese Prime Minister Abdallah Hamdok has hailed the move by the U.S. On social media, the leader of the transitional government declared it the beginning of a new era. The designation of Sudan as a state sponsor of terrorism dates back to the 1990s when Sudan briefly hosted al-Qaeda's leader Osama bin Laden and other wanted militants. All right, let's speak to Dr. Nta Asamoah, head of Africa Peace and Security Governance Program, Institute for Security Studies, who joins us via Zoom. Thank you, sir, for joining us here on Africa Live. How has Sudan's international isolation affected the country in the past 3 decades?
Thank you very much for having me. It's affected Sudan in many ways. First of all, economically, it has isolated Sudan from the center of interactions with other countries. It's also made it very difficult in many ways for even individuals to transact or even transfer money into Sudan. And so it's impacted Sudan economically in very many ways, particularly because it also prevented Sudan from borrowing when it needs to. So economically, it's been a very major blow to Sudan. And even in terms of Sudan's presence in the international system, you cannot operate so well if you cannot interact freely with a country as important as the United States. So the lifting does make it a very important and major part in Sudan's history.
Well, we've heard of all the negative impacts of the isolation of Sudan from the international community. What's next now that the country has been removed from the U.S. list of state sponsors of terrorism?
It means that now that the Sudanese government is struggling in many ways to stand economically on its feet, it makes it easy for the country to borrow from the international system. For those who want to do business in Sudan to freely transact, for individuals who want to transfer money either in or out of Sudan to freely do that. And it also makes it easy for people like Sudanese people who want to embark on very strategic businesses to do that. So for Sudan, this is one thing that will free the country to be able to interact within the international system as a country that is free to relate with even the major powers.
All right, Dr. Nta, let's leave it there for now. We appreciate your insights on that subject matter. Let's now move on. The groundbreaking event for the construction of the Africa Centers for Disease Control and Prevention headquarters has been held in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. The project is part of a commitment that China made to Africa 2 years ago during the Forum on China-Africa Cooperation in Beijing. African Union officials who spoke during the event thanked the Chinese government and President Xi Jinping for having kept their promise to the continent. CGTN's Garum Chala reports.
This was a moment of joy and excitement for Africa and Africans as the unveiling of the Africa Centers for Disease Control and Prevention headquarters construction project got underway. Ethiopian and Chinese government officials, as well as those from the African Union, were all here for the historic groundbreaking ceremony for what will be the future seat of the Continental Health Body. The project is fully financed by the government of China.
This building, it is a building that we want, it is a building that we need. It will raise the capacity of our testing, our surveillance systems. It will help us also to build our technical capacity in the area of diagnostics.
It all started a couple of years back with a promise by Chinese President Xi Jinping to build and gift this headquarters to the continent. And with this event, Beijing has shown Africa and the world that it has kept its promises.
Today's ceremony symbolizes the groundbreaking of this project, and I believe it will become a new landmark of Addis and the testimony of China-Africa solidarity against COVID-19.
This $200 million future Africa CDC headquarters will have state-of-the-art laboratories, office complex, and residential buildings in it. It's expected to be completed in a 2 years' time. And there is still more support from China heading to Africa.
China will try to make vaccines a global public good, which is accessible and affordable for African countries. China is joining hands with Africa to build an ever stronger China-African community with a shared future.
Strengthening continental health systems and building an African-owned health body were all part of Agenda 2063, the 50 years development plan for Africa. The AU says serious partners like China are helping make the African dream become a concrete reality.
We are looking for friends to support Africa. We are looking for those who are serious about the future of this continent. And when we say strategic partnerships, and when we mention strategic partnerships, China comes first. And we appreciate very much this partnership we have with China.
10 years ago, China gifted this African Union Commission headquarters to the continent. And now, yet another show of solidarity has been displayed through this new Africa CDC project. For Africa, given the growing health challenge across the continent, the construction of this Africa CDC headquarters and its operation at full capacity would mean a lot. Member states even hope to see the new headquarters as a center of excellence for training and knowledge transfer. Nta, CGTN, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
Further afield, more restrictions are being rolled out in parts of the United States. The New York City mayor is warning of a full lockdown in the coming weeks if numbers don't start dropping. As the death toll passes 300,000, mass vaccinations began across the country. The acting Defense Secretary Christopher Miller is the latest senior official to get a shot. The Pentagon earlier announced that several of its senior staff would get inoculated publicly as it looks to promote the safety of vaccines. High-risk healthcare workers are also at the top of the list, and an intensive care nurse was among the first to receive a shot. CGTN's Dan Williams has more.
A pivotal moment in the United States and the fight against the COVID-19 pandemic. Frontline healthcare workers receiving the newly authorized coronavirus vaccines. In Long Island, New York, this intensive care unit nurse received the first of 2 doses as photographers were on hand to document the long-awaited moment.
I'm relieved. I feel like healing is coming. I hope this marks the beginning to the end of a very painful time in our history. I want to instill public confidence that the vaccine is safe.
There were similar scenes in New Orleans, Louisiana, with an infectious disease doctor among the first to receive the vaccine there, while staff at the Pittsburgh Medical Center also received theirs. Chicago would begin its first vaccinations on Tuesday. Roseland Community Hospital recently purchased this ultra-cold freezer in order to ensure the vaccine could be stored correctly. The Pfizer vaccine needs to be stored at -70 degrees Celsius. Mark McGee is the hospital's emergency preparedness manager.
It's heartbreaking because I've had family members in the hospital. I've had family members that passed away from COVID. And it's a personal thing for me to make sure that this goes right the first time around.
The US vaccine rollout provides some light at the end of this desperately dark tunnel. The pandemic could soon potentially be at an end. But in the short term, authorities are quick to stress that the risks of COVID-19 remain. There is still a long line of people at this hospital waiting for a COVID-19 test. Each day, the state of Illinois records thousands of new cases. It comes as the US passed the grim milestone of 300,000 COVID-19 deaths.
My biggest concern is that we stay diligent. We make sure we're still doing the same thing. We're wearing our masks. We're doing our social distancing. We're following the same CDC guidelines going forward until enough people are vaccinated where we can start relaxing those restrictions.
it's expected the average American, those not deemed high risk, will begin to receive the vaccine by next spring. There is now hope the pandemic is nearing an end. But a difficult path still lies ahead. Dan Williams, CGTN, Chicago.
The world is still in the woods as the coronavirus pandemic claims more lives. It's a situation that was unexpected. However, mankind has long been digging and indeed getting in a hole that would be hard to get out of. In today's first episode of Panorama Africa, Lindy Mtongana unpacks the grim realities of climate change across the world.
How dare you? People are suffering. People are dying. Entire ecosystems are collapsing. We are in the beginning of a mass extinction. How dare you?
It hurts.
Global warming, climate change and conservation. Words that are more often said than acted upon by governments and leaders of the world. The truth is, climate change has been brought about by the greed that favors few but affects us all. And not just humans, the entire planet. If wild animals and plants had an enemy, it would probably be us humans. We need only look at the ways in which we've ravaged the earth to understand why. Here's some facts to help put this into perspective. Over the last century, the planet has warmed at a rate of 1 degree Celsius a year. Hard to notice as we go about our day-to-day lives, but over the past 5 years, temperatures have risen at record levels. The whole situation is linked to 3 human activities: the burning of fossil fuels, intensive farming, especially for meat and crop production, and deforestation. Here in Africa, extreme weather patterns are already wreaking havoc in many nations. In 2019 and much of 2020, parts of East and West Africa were hit by floods, leaving a trail of death and destruction. The region is also recovering from 2 devastating cyclones, which resulted in deaths and the displacement of thousands. The cyclones also destroyed crop production, leaving aid agencies to respond to multiple humanitarian crises.
In Beira you go, the scars of Cyclone Nta are visible. However, authorities and aid workers believe that they have the cholera outbreak under control.
A desert locust invasion that started in the Horn of Africa has added to the region's woes. Crops that were planted by smallholder farmers have been destroyed by the pests. Meanwhile, weather experts have been predicting a drought on the heels of these floods. It seems when it rains, it pours in Africa. Even sunny spells are no longer normal. They're often searingly hot and accompanied by food and water shortages. This is climate change at play, and it's not just Africa. Asia, the Americas, and Europe have all found themselves at the deep end of climate change. Cyclones, heat waves, fires, and heavy rains are all becoming increasingly common. According to German infographics firm Statista, countries like China, Bangladesh, Pakistan, and India are among the world's most polluted. However, countries like Finland, Norway, Sweden, and Estonia are those considered least polluted. Here in Africa, Ghana, Nigeria, Ethiopia, and Egypt are among those whose pollution levels are most worrying. Although there have been efforts to contain the situation, lack of cooperation is seen as the biggest impediment. Some conservationists see climate conferences as little more than talk shops, all heat but no fire. The United States pulled out of the 2016 Paris Agreement, which was aimed at fostering a global response to the threat of climate change. Remember, the US is home to only 4.4% of the global population, yet it is one of the world's biggest emitters of greenhouse gases, the main cause of global warming. But with the recent presidential election outcome in the United States, things could change. Joe Biden, who won the polls, has promised to review Trump's decision to pull out of the Paris Agreement.
We're here to raise our voices. We know that climate change has already started and it's killing us.
While grandstanding marks this debate, coral reefs are disappearing and glaciers are melting, leading to rising sea levels. Despite Africa contributing the least to the world's greenhouse gas emissions, the continent is feeling the heat. Food production is being compromised as populations continue to expand. Forests are being cleared to create habitats, which feeds into an already complicated situation. This is conflict. For a long time, the Sahel region was a bedrock of symbiotic coexistence between herders and farmers. Farmers would allow their nomadic brothers and sisters to graze their livestock on their land and fertilize it for the next growing season. But years of unfavorable weather patterns led to cycles of poor harvests. With dwindling food production, a conflict ensued. This is what has been exploited by Al-Qaeda and ISIL to create a potent security threat. This has already claimed a regime in Mali and has influenced election outcomes in countries like Nigeria and Guinea-Bissau. We could list more and more climate change-related cases and incidents. However, this boils down to individuals and governments. Climate change poses a serious threat to the fundamental rights for all. It affects our access to food, to health, and compromises our quality of life for individuals and communities. It is thus our individual, national, and international responsibility to care for nature for us and future generations. The late Nobel laureate Professor Wangari Maathai once said, "Mother Nature is very generous, but also very unforgiving." The reality is, if you destroy nature, nature could destroy you. If we are not careful enough and responsible, this could be practical in our lifetime. It would appear it has already started happening.
You're watching Africa Live on CGTN. We've got your business segment coming up next. Here's a look at what's ahead. Nigeria's trade deficit balloons in the third quarter of 2020. And the IMF applauds Somalia's government for financial reforms.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Welcome back to Africa Live. We appreciate your company. There's renewed optimism that a post-Brexit trade deal between the EU and the UK can be eked out by the end of the transition period on the 31st of December. Ursula von der Leyen says talks are now in the very last mile. A 180 from last week when a working dinner between the Commission President and the UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson led to both sides saying no deal was the most likely outcome. CGTN's Tony Waterman has the latest from Brussels.
After a dark and gloomy few days, the sun appears to be shining again on post-Brexit trade talks. Europe's chief negotiator telling EU ambassadors that talks are now moving in the right direction, and a deal could still be clinched, perhaps even as early as this week. Heading into the meeting early Monday morning, Michel Barnier said it was Europe's responsibility to continue the very difficult negotiations, and that the next few days will be crucial.
We are going to give every chance to this agreement, which is still possible. Two conditions haven't been filled yet: free and fair competition and an agreement that guarantees reciprocal access to markets and waters.
Negotiators were back around the table in Brussels on Monday, trying to bust through the impasse after their respective bosses, Commission President Ursula von der Leyen and UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson, agreed on Sunday to go the extra mile for a deal. And there are signs that compromises are finally emerging. An independent arbitrator could reportedly help solve the tricky issue of maintaining fair competition in the future. But a deal on access to UK fishing waters remains elusive. with both sides saying more work is needed to bridge the divide.
As the Prime Minister said, we need to make sure that we go the extra mile. It's what businesses want, it's what people in our country want, and that is precisely what we're doing. We're not going to be walking away from these talks.
With another deadline come and gone in these negotiations, neither the EU nor the UK put an expiration date on this latest round of talks. But the ultimate deadline remains December 31st, when the transition period ends, trade deal or not.
We're on the very last mile to go, but it's an essential one. And we want a level playing field. We want a level playing field not only at the start, but also over time. And this is the architecture we are building.
The longer negotiations drag out, the less time Parliament will have to review and ratify a deal if one is found. But there's growing speculation that even without the final sign-off from MEPs, the treaty could be provisionally applied to help protect consumers and businesses in what is a $1 trillion a year trade relationship. Tony Waterman, CGTN, Brussels.
Nigeria has recorded a negative trade balance in the third quarter of 2020 amounting to $6 billion. It's the latest grim report for Africa's biggest economy, which slumped to a recession in the third quarter after a COVID-led plunge in crude prices. CGTN's Kelechi Mekalam reports from Abuja.
The latest report from the country's Bureau of Statistics puts the total trade volume for the third quarter at $21.6 billion. That's a 34% increase compared to the previous quarter. While exports stood at $7.72 billion, total import value was $13.89 billion, leaving a $6.1 billion deficit.
We are in minus 3.10%. There are many countries that are double digit and they still can't see light in the end of the tunnel. So I think with our population, with our determination to shift more towards the private sector, and with excess liquidity in the private sector right now to invest, I think that we will come out of it stronger. That's not only that there is pressure on oil, which is our major commodity that gives us 90% of our forex revenue. It disrupted it, and so we lost substantial volume and also drop in price from our benchmark of $57 down to $28. But on the other hand, of course, our export was also impacted on because the disruption on the supply chain affected our industries. About 80% of our manufacturing capacity still imported their raw materials. So the disruption meant we couldn't get them in.
Nigeria's biggest impact on the balance of trade deficit has been the playoff in the oil sector. The nation's production volume dropped from 2.1 million barrels to 1.3 million barrels per day, but government has been pushing to increase non-oil exports.
We have done well last year on export of non-oil, and so those are likely to pick up sooner than later. We're struggling to keep the import down, and we're doing that with import substitution programs, and there's a lot of investment on that side. We spend over $12.5 billion importing and food-related items and all that. So there are actions to reduce the impact of. The central bank has put over $3.5 trillion on the table. The government's economic sustainability plan, $2.3 trillion on the table. And we have more involvement of private sector in a way that we haven't seen before.
The value of imports in the third quarter is the highest recorded since 2017. Industry observers project that the trade may stabilize by the second quarter of 2021. But experts want to see infrastructural development, standardized production, and a boost in manufacturing, which is expected to trigger a boost in export and balance out the trade. Kelechi Mekalam, CGTN Abuja, Nigeria.
The International Monetary Fund has praised Somalia's government for initiating a series of financial reforms in the country. The announcement was made after the IMF completed the first review of the extended credit facility for the Horn of Africa nation in November. CGTN's Abdulaziz Billo has more details from Mogadishu.
The International Monetary Fund says an extended credit facilities supported program for Somalia is off to a good start despite challenges posed by the coronavirus pandemic and climate-related disasters. The global financial lending institution has hailed Mogadishu's swift response to the pandemic, as well as floods that ravaged parts of the country and an ongoing locust invasion that's threatening food security. Earlier this year, the Ministry of Finance announced a wave of reforms, including tax relief on basic food commodities, as part of efforts to mitigate the impact of the virus.
Under the new plan by IMF, Somalia now stands to benefit from an immediate disbursement of $10 million, bringing the country's total disbursement under the agreement to more than $365 million.
The international community, with their support, is also mindful of the effect that this had, and they will also increase their interventions in the economy. So we really think that the next year will be a very positive year for us.
Ahmed Qadr Abdi is an economic analyst and a lecturer at the University of Somalia. He says the move by IMF is timely, as it will give the federal government ample time to overcome economic challenges it faces.
The money that will be given to Somalia can assist the government of Somalia in tackling these issues, especially the economy that has been devastated or damaged by COVID-19, the decline in the remittance money, and also the locust invasion in many agricultural areas of Somalia.
Last month, the World Bank said the country's economy will shrink by 2.5% this year due to the coronavirus pandemic. However, the economy is forecast to rebound to 2.9% growth next year and 3.2% in 2022.
The decision of the IMF shows that Somalia has the economic system, or what we call public financial management, has been improved, so that this system is reliable, so that based on that, IMF has taken the decision and has completed the review of extended credit facility arrangement for Somalia.
Earlier this year, Somalia became the 37th nation to receive debt relief under the Heavily Indebted Poor Countries Initiative, arguing that Mogadishu has taken necessary steps to begin receiving debt relief. Abdul Aziz Bilo, CGTN, Mogadishu, Somalia.
And the very latest news from Africa Live coming your way after the break. Stay tuned. Here's a peek at the headline. How an Egyptian art center in the village of Harania is empowering local communities by exposing their unique talents to the outside world.
Join us in Global Business and see Africa through our eyes. The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Qanater, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
Welcome back, and now to our continuing series, Made in Africa. On the outskirts of the Egyptian capital, Cairo, in a village called Harania, a beautiful experiment began decades ago. In 1952, an Egyptian architect, RAMSES WISSA believed that all children are artistic. He wanted to dig deeper into how to trigger their creativity. The result was a unique experiment in tapestry weaving. It has produced extraordinary works from a regular Egyptian village. These tapestries have been collected by museums and galleries across the world. The RAMSES WASSEF Art Center is now a place that has empowered Egyptian villagers. They've earned more income and had a chance to tour the world. Let's take a look.
My name is Ikram Noshi. I am the director of the RAMSES WISSA WASSEF Art Center. RAMSES WISSA WASSEF wanted to prove his idea in creativity with the children, so he chose an ordinary Egyptian village which had no arts or crafts whatsoever, and invited children from the age of 11 to come and weave. It is sometimes strange for people to understand why an architect will choose weaving to experiment or to demonstrate his experiment, because weaving is a very slow craft. It is challenging to the children. When they will finish the small piece of weaving or tapestry they have in front of them, they will have a great sense of achievement. We have 3 rules. The first rule is we don't show children any drawings to copy. We don't discuss or show them any other forms of art. The final and third rule was we don't criticize the children. RAMSES WISSA WASSEF was a professor of history of architecture and history of art. He understood very well the importance for any craft or art to survive, that you must have the basic tools and the basic raw materials which you need. So the wool is Egyptian local sheep wool. The warp is made of Egyptian cotton, which is the background of the tapestry. Remains the color. The color is the most important thing. He knew that through history, natural vegetable plants were always used. They existed in Egypt, they existed in the Middle East. Many of them, they have disappeared. And he reintroduced them again in our garden here. So now we plant our own dyes. The first recognition to the Art Center started in 1958, when we were invited to the first international exhibition in Basel in Switzerland. From that year, the outside world knew about the special school of weaving RAMSES WISSA WASSEF started. We've been invited since to museums and exhibitions all over the world. What is special about our tapestry is that each one of these works is one of a kind. That means we don't have a design the artist or the weaver copy from. They choose their own tapestry one by one. And of course, the beauty of the natural vegetable dyes which we color all our wool with. This is really what makes our tapestries stand out. One of a kind and the natural colors. This work has changed the life of the children who started here. They are no longer children. They started when they were 11, now they are 40 to 55 years of age. This is the only way they make their living. They take about 40% of the final sale of the tapestries. Between 25 to 30 goes to the material itself, the wool and the colors and everything. And between 25 to 30%, this is what the Art Center receives from the sale of these tapestries. So it has transformed their life. They live in better conditions. And, they travel all around the world. It has empowered women, because the majority of the weavers here are women, so it has empowered them and their families. They have a say in how their family should run, because they are big contributors to the economy of family, the small family. But, I don't know how it affects Egypt as a whole, but it's something, it's a good window for, beautiful, creative handcraft.
All right, time now for a short break. We will see you on the other side of the break with your sport news. Here's a peek at that headline. Tunisian weightlifting star Karim Ben Henia sets sights on the 2021 Olympic Games in Japan.